Hey guys, tonight we step into the sand and shadow of the Roman arena, where gladiators did not rely on padded armor or consent but on crude shields, swords, and the roar of the crowd. Forget the grand spectacles and heroic victories you see in Hollywood epics. The real story is about rotting wounds, the smell of sweat and blood, and the echo of expectation before a fight to the death. So tonight we ask what it actually felt like to stand alone in the sand, with only a wooden sword against an armored opponent. What was it like to sleep in damp barracks under the lash of your trainer and wake to the clank of iron shackles? Every arena had its own horrors, so let me know where you are tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It is always eye-opening to see who joins as we walk into the arena together. Now dim the lights, pull your blanket close, and let us step into the sand together. You wake before dawn, dragged from sleep by a guard's rough shove and the hollow clang of metal chains. Your head pounds from the night's restless dreams of sand and steel. Outside, the sky remains dark, but torches flicker in the distance as you shuffle toward a low building framed by wooden posts and rough stone walls. The air smells of sweat and damp straw. Somewhere nearby, trainers bark orders, their voices sharp and unyielding. You cannot see their faces yet, but you know they hold whips and know how to break men. The trainer greets you with a flick of his wrist. He wears a coarse tunic, stained dark from sweat and blood. His voice rings out and you flinch. You learn immediately that hesitation leads only to pain. He commands you to strip to the waist. Your body feels exposed beneath the torchlight, each scar and bruise a testament to past failures. You obey. He calls you forward and inspects your arms for strength and your back for fight scars. When he finds a knot of muscle, he nods and moves on. Where he finds weakness, he taps the muscle with a wooden stick and you feel a hot sting. Meals come only when the trainer deems you worthy. You eat stale bread soaked in watered-down wine, and you swallow it quickly. Hunger aches in your belly, but you know better than to linger. A slip of the tongue earns ridicule and a sharp strike across the shoulder. You learn to keep your mouth shut and your eyes on the trainer's boots. He measures your response, gauging your eagerness and your fear. Both matter in equal measure. Fear keeps you alive. Eagerness drives you onward. At first light, you are led into the training yard. The ground under your feet shifts between packed dirt and gravel. Nearby, other recruits practice basic footwork. They thrust wooden swords at straw dummies or squat against walls in forced stances. Chairs lie overturned where those who falter have fallen mid-squat. You join their ranks, lined up shoulder to shoulder. The trainer circles like a hawk, never resting, never blinking. His whip cuts the air to punctuate every order. You feel every blink in your throat. You pick up a wooden sword that weighs more than any blade should. Your first swings are awkward. You miss the straw dummy by a head. The trainer snarls and strikes the pommel of your sword with his stick. The splintered wood digs into your palm. You taste blood and grit on your tongue. You bite it back and try again. This time your strike lands squarely and the dummy wobbles. You feel a flicker of pride. The trainer says nothing. Instead, he points at a bucket of water and orders you to wash the blood away. You bend and dip your hands, then fling a handful of water onto the ground. Training continues. By midday, your arms burn and your breath comes in ragged gasps. The trainer forces you into sparring pairs. You face a larger man who squares his shoulders like a bull. He swings with purpose, and you raise your wooden sword to block. The impact shudders up your arm. You stagger back, teeth clenched against the pain. Your opponent presses forward. You parry and retreat until your back hits the wall. He swings again and you duck, but your head bounces on the stone. Stars float behind your eyes. You feel shame more than fear. You circle him and strike at his unprotected side. The wooden sword thuds against his ribs, but he barely falters. He strikes again. You fall to one knee. The The trainer leaps in with a roar. He grabs you by the collar and hauls you upright. You swallow twice. The trainer's gut is in your face, and you stare at his angry eyes. He roars such that the earth seems to shake. You nod quickly. He spits at your boot and pushes you away. You step back, ready to fight again. Night falls and the yard clears, but your lesson continues in the barracks. You squat before a low shelf, where you lay your wet tunic and wooden sword. Your body aches, yet you force a second meal into your gut. The mess hall remains lit by torches and candles. Other recruits share whispered curses. You swallow hard, tasting bitter wine and stale bread. You hear the guard at the door, count each footstep. When he leaves, you stand and find a corner to stretch your aching limbs. Each muscle protests as you lean and twist. You taste iron at the back of your throat, and you breathe slowly to steady your pulse. Sleep comes only when bodies finally collapse. You curl on a mat filled with straw. Dampness seeps through your tunic, chilling your skin, yet exhaustion grips you tighter than cold. You dream of steel flashing and blood flowing. You dream of a crowd baying for your death. You dream of your home, forgotten behind a chain of fences and stone walls. Morning comes too soon. The guard shakes you awake before dawn. Your eyes sting. You rise and follow the echo of boots. Day after day, your routine repeats. You learn formations and holds that send pain through joints you did not know existed. You spar until bruises bloom across your chest and forearms. You run until your lungs burn. You climb ropes until blisters carpet your hands. You march in silence with wooden shields heavier than shields should be. Each motion trains both body and mind. You learn discipline. You learn hunger. You learn fear. You learn obedience. Weeks slip by and you notice small changes. Your arms grow firm. Your shoulders square. You begin to anticipate the trainer's stick. You parry with purpose. You plant your feet in the dirt and brace for impact. You find a spark of defiance in your chest. The trainer notices too. His nod comes without words. He stands closer now when you train, as though examining the steel he sees in your eyes. He still breaks those who falter, but he spares those who rise with fire. One evening, he calls you forward. He holds your wooden sword by its blade and hands it to you by the hilt. Your hand closes around the smooth wood. Before you realize what is happening, he points toward another recruit. You approach as if in a trance. The other man smiles at you with hollow eyes. You lift the sword. You raise your arm. His shoulders flare, and he braces for your strike. You pause only a heartbeat and imagine the ragged crack of body against wood. You strike true. He staggers, and you lower your arm. The trainer steps in. He nods and pushes you back. You feel both shame and pride. You feel alive. This is the way you learn. You learn through pain. You learn through hunger. You learn through the fall and the rise. You learn through the stick and the sword. In this yard of sweat and fear, you become someone else. The man you were drifts away like smoke. In its place, you stand stronger, sharper, shaped by every bruise and every command. You do not know what tomorrow brings. You only know you must obey, must endure, must survive. And in that knowing, you find a fierce spark. It burns beneath your ribs, pushing blood through your veins. It is the spark of a gladiator in training. It is the spark that may one day decide life or death. You wake hours before sunrise to the hollow clatter of carts on cobblestones. Torches line the street as you are herded down narrow alleys toward the forum. You are not alone. Other captives follow in your shadow, their wrists bound and their faces hollow with dread. A guard thrusts you onto a raised platform of rough wooden planks. You glance around as another guard shoos you into place beside a second man whose arms are scarred from old wounds. Above you, togas rustle, as wealthy Romans cluster on marble steps, gossiping and sipping wine before the day's main spectacle. A slave trader clears his throat. and holds aloft a scroll. He reads names in a loud voice that echoes off stone walls. When he calls out your name, you step forward. The platform tilts slightly beneath your feet, and you feel the cool morning air on your bare arms. The trader lifts your chained hand and turns your palm toward the crowd. You taste dust and fear on your tongue. He taps your forearm with a thin wooden stick, noting the curve of your muscle. You hold still, counting each breath as if it might be your last. Bidding begins soon after. A man in a purple stripe on his toga leans forward and raises a finger. He bids more sesterces than you have ever seen piled on a table. Others nod and raise their own fingers in silent competition. You hear coins clink as assistants unload bags of currency near a stone pillar. The trader's voice rises and falls, marking each increase. Your heart pounds in your chest. You count each bid as it ascends, imagining the weight of those gold coins, the power they confer. At last the hammer falls. Your name is called. A murmur ripples through the crowd. You are sold. A lanista steps forward, a man of broad shoulders and sun-leathered skin. He wears simple tunics spattered with sweat from the training grounds. He bows slightly and grips the chains binding your wrist as though checking their strength. He whispers 2 words you barely catch before he hauls you off the platform. With me, you stumble as guards wrench your other wrist free from its mate. You feel the lanista's grip tighten, and you pulse with worry and relief in equal measure. You are led through the forum's arched exit, down a clapboard corridor into a courtyard where carts wait. You climb into an ox cart piled with straw. Other new recruits crowd beside you, sharing the same silence. You glance at them and see eyes that mirror your own shock and confusion. No one speaks. A heavy wooden gate swings closed behind you with a loud crack. You are jolted forward as the carts rumble away. The journey to the Ludus seems to stretch forever. The cart lists with each dip in the road. You breathe in the scent of damp earth and leather. The lanista rides perched on a second cart, his silhouette framed against the grey sky. Every so often he glances back at you, studying your expression. Your muscles ache from the ride. You shift your weight on the straw bed, testing each sore joint. You wonder if this is worse than the auction block. You taste ash in your throat. At midday, the carts halt beside a low stone wall. The lanista nods and motions for you to follow. You step down and stretch your legs. You lick cracked lips and blink against the sun. You see the training school before you. High walls capped with red tile, narrow windows barred by iron grates, and a single gate standing open. You step inside and immediately feel the hush. No birds call here. The only sound is the thud of leather sandals on cobbles. Inside the courtyard, trainees crouch in squads. Some carry wooden poles and practice thrusts. Others drag logs behind them or haul carts across the grounds. You stand in a line as the lanista steps out of the arch. He holds a whip, but does not raise it. He calls each newcomer by name and assigns quarters based on your height and build. You follow him in silence, your mind racing with questions you dare not ask aloud. He shows you a row of small rooms, each dimly lit by a single oil lamp. The walls are whitewashed, but stained near the corners. He points to a narrow bench and a wooden chest that serves both as a seat and a place to keep your few belongings. He says nothing about privacy or comfort. You nod and lower yourself onto the bench. Your wrists still throb from the shackles. You open the chest's lid and find a set of crude tunics, leather sandals, and a small bucket for washing. You remove the ties and stand to undress, folding each piece of rag carefully before sliding on the new tunic. Later that afternoon, you step into the training yard. The lanista watches from a shaded platform. His eyes scan each recruit like a butcher inspecting meat. He calls you forward and hands you a loaf of coarse bread and a wooden cup of lukewarm water. You swallow both quickly, Hunger gnaws at your insides, but you dare not savor a single crumb. You shove the remains into a corner of the yard where rats later find them. Next, he hands you a wooden baton. He says, "It is your first weapon." He calls a second recruit, a man nearly twice your size, and orders you both to spar. Your baton feels heavy and unwieldy in your hand. The Lannister blows a conch shell made of brass, and you circle your opponent. He swings first, catching your shoulder. The blow jars your arm. Sparks flicker before your vision. You respond with a wild swing that grazes his side. He grunts but maintains his stance. The Lannister watches dispassionately. You parry and retreat until sweat beads on your brow. The Lannister sounds the shell again, and you both lower your batons. Neither of you celebrates. Instead, you notice small cuts and bruises on your flesh. You taste iron again. Before dusk, you attend your first lesson in diet and conditioning. A trainer with wispy grey hair lectures you on the importance of meats and vegetables. He says that your body must be honed like steel if it is to survive the arena. He hands each of you a small parchment bearing a list of foods and times for eating. You memorize each line as though your life depends on it. It might. At night, you return to the barracks where the Lannister stands by a brazier. He inspects your tunic once more. He says nothing, but you feel his appraisal. He hands you a small tablet and stylus. You write your name and birth city, and then he allows you to lie down. You settle on your mat of straw, every muscle still tingling from the day's ordeal. You lie awake, listening to the hush of other recruits breathing. You taste dust in the back of your throat. You know that tomorrow brings more bids on your strength and skill. You know that each dawn will thrust you further from the life you once knew. In the week that follows, you learn the layout of the ludus. You memorize the sounds of each trainer's whistle, the echo of footsteps in the corridors, the rhythm of sparring in the yard. You learn the names of fellow trainees, and you learn to squelch pity in their eyes. Some fall ill, and you see the Lannister dismiss them to the healer's hut. Others collapse on the sands and never rise. You feel both relief and dread. You wonder when it will be your turn. By the end of your first fortnight, you stand before the Lannister once more. He grips your chin and lifts your face to his. He studies your eyes. You sense approval. He nods and flings his arm toward the arena gate. You follow his gesture and peer through the bars. Beyond the gate, you glimpse the most famous amphitheater in all Rome. It looms immense and white against the sky, its arches open like the mouth of a great beast. You swallow hard. Your pulse races as you imagine the roar of the crowd, the glint of a rival's sword, the crush of the sand beneath your feet. The Lannister turns and walks away. You remain rooted in place. You feel a spark ignite in your chest, a flicker of fear and excitement. You have been bought, shaped, and tested. Now your true trial begins. The arena awaits, and with it the promise of glory, or the certainty of death. You draw in a tremulous breath, step back from the gate, and follow the Lannister into the gathering dusk. You are no longer a man of quiet streets and honest labor. You realize with a jolt, a gladiator in training, bound for battle. You wake before dawn, and the world is already moving. A guard's boot thumps against the wooden floor of your cell, and you scramble to your feet. Your wrists ache where the iron shackles bite into your skin. You swallow a dry cough and stumble forward as the guard unlocks the heavy door. Outside, wagons wait in a row, their wheels smeared with mud from last night's rain. You are shoved onto the first wagon bed, the planks rough against your knees. The man beside you groans, shifting to make room, and you catch a glimpse of his hollow cheeks and haunted eyes. Neither of you speaks. No words can soften what is to come. The guard pulls a leather strap tight around your arms, securing your chains to a ring bolted into the floor. You wince as cold metal slides across flesh. You steady yourself against the side of the wagon, trying to steady a body that trembles with equal parts fear and anticipation. A second guard climbs up and jabs a spear under your chin, forcing you to look forward. Through the thin slats of wood, you see other wagons filled with men in chains, all of them captives like yourself. Some wear torn tunics, others nothing but rough linen cloth. All of you share the same fate. A horn sounds, and the convoy lurches forward. Wheels creak and groan under their load. You taste dust on your tongue as wind whips through the open gaps in the wagon sides. The road ahead winds through sleeping villages and past fields where peasants kneel to tend crops before sunrise. No one greets this procession. Doors stay closed. Curtains remain drawn. Even animals seem to sense that this is no ordinary journey. As the sun climbs higher, you begin to hear it, a distant roar that rumbles against your chest like thunder rolling in from the sea. You freeze in your spot, listening. The roar rises and falls in waves. It carries the promise of the arena, the hunger of thousands of spectators. You imagine the sand beneath their feet, stained red. You imagine the clash of steel, the scent of blood and sweat, the final gasp of a fallen gladiator. Fear coils in your gut, and you swallow hard, your Adam's apple bobbing in your throat. Another wagon overtakes you. You see a gladiator seated inside, his arms bare and corded with muscle. His face is smeared with ash and dirt. He looks at you, and his eyes flare with recognition, not of you, but of what you represent. He leans toward the bars and whispers words you barely catch. Brace yourself. Nothing prepares you for that roar. Before you can respond, the wagon rumbles past. The lane echoes with his warning. Your own fear builds as the journey lengthens. Hours pass and the roar waxes and wanes like a cruel tide. You shift your weight and feel the chains pull at your wrists. The midday sun beats down and the wagon bed grows warm beneath your knees. Sweat soaks your tunic. Each jolt of the wheels sends a stab of pain through your arms. You grit your teeth and keep your gaze locked on the road ahead. You count each turn in the path. You imagine each mile that brings you closer to your trial. At a crossroads, the convoy halts. A detachment of horsemen rides up, trumpets blaring. The wagons part, and you catch your first full view of the amphitheater. It towers above you, a vast circle of stone arches and marble steps. Even from this distance, you sense the scale of it. You see dozens of guards lining the entry, their spears held like silent sentinels. The roar swells again, louder now, as if the walls themselves exhale. A guard yanks your chains and orders you down. You stumble onto the cobblestones, your knees buckling under the sudden drop. The weight of expectation crashes over you like a wave. You push yourself upright, brushing dust from your tunic. You see your fellow captives stepping from wagons on either side, their faces pale and drawn. Some clutch at their stomachs. Others lean against the wagon and stare at the ground. No one speaks. Not yet. You are herded along a narrow passage. Torches line the walls, their flames flickering in the slight morning breeze. The air here carries something new, sweat and perfume, roasted meat and sour wine. You swallow and a dry cough escapes. Guards push you forward. You keep your head down, trying not to meet the eyes of passing citizens. Yet their faces are everywhere. They jostle in cloaks of color. They chatter as they move toward the gate. You see children perched on their fathers' shoulders, pointing. You see women clutching fans to their cheeks, curious. You see men in toga sleeves, shading their eyes as they lean forward to catch a glimpse of you and your chained companions. At the end of the passage, the gate looms. It stands open, like a waiting mouth. 2 guards stationed on either side snap to attention. One steps forward and prods you with the butt of his spear until you cross the threshold. You step between towering columns, past arms that wave and faces that shout. You blink against the flash of sunlight as you emerge into the brightness of the arena's outer ring. The roar rises to a deafening crescendo. It rattles your bones. Dust swirls in the air. You hear the scrape of wooden shutters and the slam of heavy doors closing behind you. A guard shoves you forward, and you stumble onto the stone sands of the arena's edge. The surface beneath your sandals shifts between rough pebbles and fine grit. You feel its uneven grain through your soles. You glance up and see a sea of faces circling above on tiered seats. They stretch to the sky, ring upon ring, a living mosaic of eyes and open mouths. Torches flank each tier, their light catching golden on marble and bronze. Your throat constricts. You inhale and taste the acrid smoke from torches, mixed with the tang of sweat and sand. The sun beats down. You shade your eyes with a shaky hand and look across the sand. On the far side, you see the opposite gate, shut tight. You imagine steel bars behind it, concealing beasts or rival gladiators waiting for their turn. You imagine the moment the doors fly open, the charge of beasts, the clash of weapons, the flash of steel. A herald steps forward into the center of the arena. He wears gleaming armor and carries a long spear. He raises a hand. Instantly, the roar dims to a low rumble. The sand shifts beneath his feet as he turns slowly, scanning the crowd. Then he lifts his spear and nods once. At his signal, 2 soldiers push open the gate at your side. Your heart hammers. You step forward, chains clinking at your wrists. The sand feels loose underfoot, as though it might swallow you. You force each breath in and out. You force your shoulders back. You raise your head and face the crowd. Their eyes burn down on you. They lean forward as though they might reach into the sand and seize you. The roar swells once more, rising to a fever pitch. You feel every drumbeat of it inside your chest. You take in the enormity of the moment. You feel the weight of chains, the ache of muscles, the haze of sun. You taste the iron in your mouth. You feel the glare of torches and the heat of bodies packed tight above. You hear the crowd's roar, and the nightmare of sand and blood unfolds in your mind. Yet you stand firm. Each chain links you to your fate. Each link shapes the man you must become if you are to survive. The arena awaits. The crowd demands a show. You take your first step into the center of the sand. You are no longer a captive beneath wagons. You are a gladiator at the threshold of the greatest trial of your life. And as the roar crashes over you again, you know that this journey has only just begun. You stumble from the wagon into a swirl of dust and torchlight. Your chains clatter against the wooden platform as guards shove you forward. The ground beneath your feet is rough cobblestone, framed by walls of sun-baked stone. Above you, the roar of the arena surges like a wave crashing upon shocked senses. You press your palms against your ears for a moment and taste the grit of sand and sweat in your mouth. A guard snarls and jerks you onward. You step into a narrow passage carved beneath the stands. Torch sconces line each side of the corridor. Their flickering light casts dancing shadows on walls heavy with moisture and grime. You hear distant footsteps echoing ahead. Other gladiators pass before you in single file. Some walk without chains, their shoulders squared, their gazes resolute. Others stumble and lean against the wall, eyes wide with terror. You wonder whether they are veterans of the sands or newcomers like you. You catch sight of intricate scars on one man's chest, a map of past defeats. You swallow and follow the line toward a barred gate at the corridor's end. A guard unlocks the iron bars with a heavy ring of metal on metal. The gate swings inward to reveal a holding pen carved into the stone beneath the seats. Its floor is a patchwork of sand and broken mosaic tiles. You step through and the air seems to stifle you. The roar above grows faint as the outer gate swings shut. You turn to see other captives entering the pen. You count nearly 30 men packed shoulder to shoulder. They wear ragged tunics or only loincloths. Some clutch short wooden bucklers. Others bear rawhide pads wrapped around their forearms. All appear gaunt from hunger and fear. The pen groans with shifting bodies. You find a spot beside a barrel used for water and try to stand as still as possible. The guards bolt the gate and shuffle away, leaving you in near darkness. Only the flicker of torches outside the pen's bars hints at the vastness of the arena beyond. You feel the weight of silence settle over the group. Each man measures the next. You sense competition for survival even before the battle begins. You strain to listen for any sound beyond the bars. The roar of the crowd returns in muffled waves. You imagine the sunlit sand, scarlet banners, and biting wind that carries the scent of olive oil and sweat. You long for a glimpse of daylight, but know that your next view of the sky will be from within the arena itself, not from this cell beneath the stands. A lantern swings outside the bars, and torches flare as guards convene. An officer stands before the gate. He wears polished bronze greaves and a silvered breastplate. His helmet booms with a crest shaped like a wolf's head. He surveys the pen and the men within. You meet his gaze and feel your heart clench. He raises a finger and reads names from a scroll. One by one he steps forward and orders each man to the front of the pen. When he calls your name, you step forward, chains clinking. He nods once and gestures down a second corridor. You follow a guard carrying a torch. The second corridor is narrower and darker. Every footstep echoes. You pass empty niches where gladiators once waited. You hear carving above doorways, Latin inscriptions worn of fate and glory. The guard stops at a small cell whose door stands ajar. He pushes you inside. You step onto a raised platform of wooden planks. The cell's walls are rough stone and damp moss. A single torch mounted at head level casts flickering patterns across your face. The guard bolts the door and leaves. You turn and find 2 wooden benches and a low table. On the table lie unstrung weapons and cloth strips. You approach the table and touch a short sword with a leather strap dangling from its pommel. The grip is smooth from use. You test its weight by lifting the blade. It balances easily in your hand. You lay it down and pick up a length of cloth meant for binding around your wrists. You practice a few wraps, knots digging into callous skin. You imagine using the cloth to cushion blows or secure wounds. A distant rumble shakes the cell. You lean against the wall and press your ear to the stone. The roar subsides and grows again. You imagine crowds parting as emperors arrive. Noble women shade their eyes, and drumbeats roll across marble steps. You taste iron in your mouth at the thought of those thousands of faces staring down upon you. Fear returns in a tight knot in your chest. You let out a slow breath to calm your pounding heart. Footsteps approach. A trainer steps through the open door and flicks the torch so its light falls on your face. He wears a leather jerkin stained dark and sweat-soaked. He nods without greeting. He steps to the table and selects a wooden net and trident. He crosses the cell and tosses the net at your feet. You catch it and feel the coarse mesh against your palms. He points to the net then, to the trident slotted into its stand. He says a single word you understand without translation. Practice. You pick up the net and spread it in front of you. You step back to steady your feet and fling the net at an imaginary adversary. The mesh snaps outward in a perfect circle. You reel it back hand over hand, knots sliding along the cords. The trainer's gaze is stern yet approving. He nods and gestures with the tip of his spear toward a brief exercise in trapping objects. You lay the net flat and move around it, then fling it again. You nearly tangle your feet. You yank it back and reset. The trainer does not intervene. He watches your every move. You sense that each flick of your wrist is under his judgment. After several throws, he taps his spear on the floor. You gather the net and coil it against your hip. He then selects a short trident and demonstrates a thrusting motion. He holds the trident low, then pushes forward in a smooth arc. The 3 prongs slice the air and settle against the far stone wall. He says another single word, try. You lift the trident and mirror his stance. You thrust and nearly lose your balance. You reset and try again. The prongs scratch the wall. You taste sandpaper in your mouth. You wipe sweat from your brow and focus on alignment. The trainer nods his approval when you complete a clean motion. He steps back and tosses you a crude shield made of layered leather. It weighs more than you expect. You hold it before you and sense its balance. He motions for you to combine net and trident. You spread the net, then backstep and thrust. You feel the trident's point extend past the mesh, giving you reach. He nods again. You repeat until your arms burn. Slowly, the rumble of the crowd grows to a fevered pitch. The trainer remains silent, but his eyes narrow. He steps forward and lifts the torch higher. He points toward the cell door. You nod and return the weapons to the table. You wipe palms on your tunic and secure the cloth ties. You approach the door and grip its iron bar. You pull, and the door swings open. He steps aside. You feel the heat of the torch leave with him. Beyond the door, you see the arena's inner vestibule, where gladiators prepare. You step into a narrow passage lit by afternoon sun. You taste salt on the breeze and hear the roar like a living thing. The trainer pockets his torch. He turns and walks away with a click of leather sandals. You stand alone in the corridor, heart pounding. You lift your gaze and see the great wooden doors ahead. They stand half open. A shaft of light cuts through the darkness and lands upon the sand. You step forward until the light warms your face. You taste iron and sweat. You feel every clink of your chains as you take one final breath before entering the arena once more. You wake to the groan of heavy timbers and the reek of sweat and mold. The barracks feel alive with suffering. You lie on a narrow pallet of straw pressed against cold stone walls. Around you, men cough and moan, their lungs heavy with dust and disease. You rise on aching elbows and blink in the dim light of a single oil lamp. Your shoulders ache where you slept on uneven planks. You swallow past a lump in your throat and force your legs to carry you toward a trough of water that stands in a corner. The trough's wood is dark and damp. You cup your hands and lift brackish water to your lips. It tastes of iron and rot. You swallow twice, hoping to wash away the sour taste of fear that clings to your mouth. You glance at your reflection in a small pool of water by the trough. Your face is hollowed and streaked with grime. A jagged scar runs from your brow to your cheek, a souvenir from the training yard. You touch it with a shaky finger and feel the numb ridges where flesh once tore. You grit your teeth and spit into the trough, unwilling to swallow any more of this cursed place. You move to a bench that runs along one wall. Your fellow recruits sit shoulder to shoulder. Their eyes meet yours with urgent glances. You share this space with broken men whose hope has died long before their muscles. You know betrayal here can mean death. Yesterday, a man whispered about stealing rations and was found beaten in the latrine. He lingered for a day before slipping away. No one mourned him. You wonder if your own fate might be similar. Across the room, a gaunt veteran nudges you with an elbow. He leans forward so his raspy voice barely carries above the moans. He warns you of disease and lice. He says the infirmary smells worse than the barracks, but houses a surgeon who might save you. You nod and force a laugh that sounds hollow. You picture your own flesh swollen with fever and your body racked with chills. You do not know if you could survive such an ordeal. You shift on the bench to ease your stiff back. A guard strides through a low doorway. He carries a torch and barks orders. You freeze as he stops beside your bench. He studies your eyes and points at the door. You stand and follow behind other men toward a narrow chamber. The guard shuts the door with a clang. Inside lies a heap of thin cloaks and blankets. You claim one and wrap it around your shoulders, even though the fabric reeks of urine. The guard snarls and kicks you out, sending you stumbling back into the barracks. Food arrives at midday. The soldiers cart in a single cauldron of watery broth. You line up with others, panting from the journey. A legionary ladles a single bowl into your hands. The broth is warm but paper thin. It smells of stale grain and animal fat. You lift it to your lips and sip, trying not to wince as salt and grit mingle on your tongue. You glance at the man next to you. He drops the bowl and spills half onto the dirt floor. The legionary swings his arm and strikes the man's head. Blood spills and the man collapses. You clench your fists and look away. You cannot bear to see more suffering. After the meager meal, the barracks grow silent. Men crouch in corners or slump against walls. Some press rags to open sores that fester in hidden places. You hear the slap of cloth against flesh as men tend to wounds that refuse to heal. You rise and step to a wooden chest. You open it and find your spare tunic and sandals. You change quickly, pulling the clean tunic over your head. You slide your feet into sandals still stiff from lack of use. The new clothes cling damply to your skin. You return to the bench and sit beside the gaunt veteran. He nods at your tunic. You shrug. He tells you that better gear means higher chances of selection for favored matches. You dare to hope. The thought warms something inside you. You look at the other men. Some stare at the floor. Others close their eyes and dream of distant homes. You force your gaze forward, refusing to bow your head. You will not give them that victory. Night falls, and the guard locks the heavy door. Torches gutter in their sconces. You settle back on your pallet and pull the dirty blanket around your shoulders. You listen to the awful symphony of coughs, groans, and whispered prayers. You taste the stale bread that lingers in your gut. Hunger and fear twist in your belly. You close your eyes and count the breaths between coughs. You imagine the sand of the arena under your feet, the roar of the crowd, and the flash of steel. You wonder if your body will survive that day. Sleep comes fitfully. You drift in and out of dreams where the barracks walls close in on you. You dream of rats crawling across your chest, of disease swallowing you whole. You dream of betrayal as friends raise blades in the dark. You jolt awake at each scream, each whisper. You press a hand to your chest and whisper a prayer to any god who might be listening. You vow to survive this place, if only to write your own story. Dawn arrives in pale light that seeps through a narrow window high above. You rise once more, joints creaking in protest. You march to the trough for water. You scrub your face with trembling hands, though the water brings only fresh echoes of disease. You return to the bench and rest your back against the wall. You close your eyes for a moment and steady your breathing. You flex your fingers and feel the steel of the chains against your skin. You welcome the weight. It reminds you that you are still alive. In the corner of the barracks, you notice a small pile of wood shavings and clay. A fellow recruit kneels beside it, carving a tiny figurine of a soldier. He works in silence, his hands steady despite weakness. You sit beside him and watch his fingers shape details into the soft clay. He glances at you and nods. You return a nod, a silent exchange of humanity amid despair. The guard returns and orders you all to line up. You stand and shuffle forward. Outside the barracks, the sun breaks through clouds and warms your face. You step into the courtyard where training resumes. You leave behind the stench of sweat and disease, but you carry it within you. You carry the memory of cramped quarters and broken men whose only allies you must become. The arena awaits, and with every breath you draw strength from survival. You march forward into the light, ready to face whatever the day brings. You rise before dawn to a new ache in your side. Last night's coughing fit stole your breath and left you gasping in the darkness. You push yourself up from the pallet and stumble toward the wall, where a small basin of water waits. You dip your fingers into the cold liquid and press them to your lips. You taste salt and grit. You press the basin closer and splash water onto your face, hoping the shock will clear your head. It only makes you shiver in the chill that seeps through the walls. Back on your pallet, you find a fellow recruit curled in a ball. His shoulders heave with each breath and his skin glows with fever. You have seen him since the auction block. He was tall once and broad, a man who carried logs like they were feathers. Now he lies broken, his ribs pressing unevenly against his chest. You consider offering your blanket, but the cloth reeks of sweat and sickness. You fear that sharing it might bring his fever to you. You step away and press your palm against your own chest, reminding yourself that you must survive. You gather your few possessions and move to the bench that runs along the wall. The man beside you wakes with a start. He stares at you with wild eyes. You offer a nod, and he nods back. Neither of you trusts words. In the barracks, they twist against you like barbs. A shared look, a silent understanding, these can bind you in ways that speech cannot. You slide your hand into your tunic and press your fingers against a small stone you keep for comfort. It is smooth and warm from your body heat. You grip it and feel your heart slow. Soon the guards arrive to lead you outside for morning drills. You line up in rows before a shouting trainer. He barks orders in a rough voice that rattles your bones. You march, squat, lunge, pivot. Ropes coil across your shoulders, and you drag logs in arcs that burn your arms. You swallow the pain and match each command. Around you, other men falter and collapse, but you stand tall. You steady your breathing. You remind yourself of the stakes. Each man who falls here is left behind, a burden the trainer refuses to bear. When drills end, you return to the barracks dripping with sweat. The air inside is stifling. You slip off your tunic and hang it over a peg. The breeze from the open doorway cools your skin. You notice that several blankets have been snatched by men too weak to guard their own. You tighten your grip on your blanket and tuck it under your arm. Hunger gnaws in your belly. Food rations arrive soon. You wait in line once more for a bowl of thin porridge and a small loaf of hard bread. You swallow hastily, tasting dust and grain. You force down each bite, even as your stomach churns. Midday brings the worst trial of all. The barracks fill with stench from the latrines. Mere slits in the floor beneath dripping pipes. Men shuffle in to relieve themselves. Rats scurry around feet seeking scraps of grain and flesh. You avert your gaze and hurry past. At the trough, you refill your basin with water to wash away the smell that clings to your nostrils. You splash your face again, willing the coolness to clear the cloud in your mind. A messenger arrives with orders for the evening's event. 2 gladiators have clashed in the afternoon games and one lies dying. You and your fellows are to scrub the sand from the arena. You file out and grab buckets and brooms. You work under the brutal sun, sweeping blood into piles and shoveling it into carts. You taste iron on your tongue as you lift each load. You feel the eyes of spectators on you, some shouting jeers. You ignore them. You focus on each motion, each drop of sweat, each bone-cracking movement. This work is as deadly as any fight. When the sun dips low, you return to the barracks. You stand at the door and wait for the guard to unlock the bolt. Inside, you find a torch lit in the corner. You move quickly to your pallet. You notice the man you offered the blanket to yesterday. He is still curled in his shroud of straw. You kneel beside him and place the blanket over his shoulders. You rake aside the straw and see bruises across his ribs. You reach for the basin and pour water over a cloth. You dab at his forehead. He stirs and his eyes open. You hold his gaze and he nods once. You step away, knowing that kindness here is a weapon as sharp as any sword. Night deepens and the barracks grow silent. Only the coughs and wheezes break the hush. You lie on your pallet and trace the grain in the ceiling. You think of home, of fields of wheat and clear skies. You imagine the smell of bread baking and the laughter of family. You close your eyes and feel tears slide down your cheeks. You blink them away. In this place, tears are weakness. You swallow and press the comfort stone in your hand until your fingers ache. A tremor in the floor shakes you awake. You hear distant shouting. A guard storms through the door and barks names. You sit up and rub your eyes. The guard shoves a parchment into your hand. It is an order for a midnight match. You scan the list and find your name. You feel bile rise in your throat. You stand and follow the guard without speaking. Other men stumble out, dazed and terrified. You glance at their faces. They mirror your own dread. You step into the corridor that leads to the holding pen. Your legs tremble. You grip the wall for support. The guard shoves you toward the barred gate. The pen awaits. You know the path well now. You imagine the roar, the sand, the clash of steel and bone. You swallow hard and step through. The door slams behind you. In the pen you find two gladiators waiting. They wear leather belts, studded with metal. Their eyes gleam in the torchlight. One nods at you. You nod back and grip your wooden sword. The trainer's trumpet blasts above. You raise your weapon. You step forward into the path of the gladiators. The sand beneath your feet feels hot and gritty. You taste blood and fear. You swallow and remember the barracks, the broken men, the stolen blanket, the comfort stone. You hold your sword steady and face your fate. The pen gate opens and the roar crashes over you. You step into the corridor and march toward the arena. Your legs burn, your heart pounds, yet you feel something new, something fierce. You remember the allies you made in the barracks, the men you helped and who helped you. You remember kindness amid cruelty. You think of home and what you fight to return to. You step into the arena's light and raise your sword. The crowd's roar greets you. You steel yourself. You are not broken. You are alive. And you will fight. You wake before dawn to the clang of iron on stone. In the corner of the training yard, a crate of weapons stands open, its lid marked with the faded symbol of the ludus. You step forward and peer inside. Rows of swords lie heel to pommel, their blades dulled by countless drills. You lift the nearest sword and feel its weight. The metal is cold and rough, where it has been ground down. You press your thumb against the edge and feel nothing sharp. You run your fingers along the fuller, noting the crude forging marks. This blade will not slice silk, it will batter bone. You carry the sword to a post at the center of the yard. The trainer stands nearby, arms folded across his chest. His leather jerkin creaks as he shifts his weight. He nods at you. You take a deep breath and raise the sword overhead. You bring it down in a sweeping arc. The blade thuds against the wooden post, rattling your bones. You repeat the motion until your arms burn. Each strike leaves a dull echo in your ears. Sweat beads on your brow and drips into your eyes. You hesitate only a moment before swinging again, testing the blade's balance and the strength of your own grip. At the end of your turns, the trainer steps forward and taps the blade with a wooden stick. The sword vibrates against the post and the stick. He nods approvingly and motions to a second post. There lies a battered shield of animal hide, stretched over a wooden frame. The hide is cracked and stained from past blows. You lift the shield and feel its weight on your forearm. You step back and brace your stance. The trainer hands you a short wooden club. He raises it and strikes the shield with full force. The club spits splinters and the hide shudders. You realize this barrier will not stop a glancing cut from a real blade. It will only delay it. Next, the trainer hands you the club and tells you to strike again. You pound the shield until it sags under the repeated impact. Each blow jars your shoulder. You test your footwork, circling the shield as if facing an opponent. You lift and strike, guarding your body behind that thin layer of hide. You feel every crack and tear as the trainer's weapon breaks the shield's fibers. You press harder with each swing, learning the shield's limits as blaze. A fellow recruit calls your name. He waves you toward a rack of helmets and cuirasses. You follow and find a battered bronze helmet, its crest broken off. You lift it and place it on your head. The metal presses against your skull. You bend your neck and twist to test its fit. It tilts with each movement, its lining worn thin. You run your fingers along the flared rim and find dents and cracks. You lift the helmet and swap it for one of iron. Its surface is rough but more intact. You place it back on your head, bracing your chin beneath the leather straps. You tighten the laces until the helmet fits snugly. It presses against your cheekbones and gums at the back of your neck. The trainer steps back and raises his arm. Another man strides toward you, sword drawn. His blade glints in the sun, though it looks nearly as dull as yours. He pauses a few steps away and shrugs. You lift your shield and raise your sword. He lunges first with a horizontal cut. You raise the shield, and the blade jerks against the leather. You feel the shock in your arm, and send your own blade swinging. Your blow lands against his shield, splintering wood near the rim. You duck under his next swing, and strike at his flank. The dull steel thuds against his cuirass, and you feel the impact through your hands. Your sparmet steps back. He nods and returns to the rack. You lower your sword and shield, breathing hard. Your chest heaves beneath the tunic, and your muscles tremble. The trainer approaches and taps the edge of your sword. He wipes the blade on a rag and hands it back. He gestures at a low bench. You sit and unbuckle your shield. You wipe sweat from your forehead and feel the sting of bruises already forming on your arms. Behind you, other recruits test their gear. A man grapples with a weighted net that snaps back and tangles his legs. You spot another, adjusting a trident that glints with rust at the tips. You stand and follow him toward a pile of greaves and vambraces. The metal is scored with dents and holes repaired by rivets. You slip the vambrace onto your forearm. It clangs and slides until you fasten leather straps. You test your grip on the sword again, swinging your arm to feel the vambrace move with you. It chafes where metal meets skin. You tighten the leather and flex your elbow. The movement is stiffer now, but your skin remains uncut. You stride to the post once more. The trainer hands you a second sword, this one slightly straighter, and with a fuller that suggests better forging. You lift it and heft it. You feel the balance shift in your hand, and the blade hums softly as you move. You smile at the change. With this weight you might find some advantage. You step back and raise your sword in a salute to the trainer. He nods and calls another man forward. You watch as the new recruit takes your discarded sword and mimics your earlier drills. You notice how the man struggles with the blade's weight. You realize how much difference a single notch can make in combat. After each recruit tests the swords and shields, the trainer calls you all to the center of the yard. He slaps a battered helmet on the head of each man in turn, adjusting straps beneath each chin. He hands each man a sword and shield. The gear is a mismatched armory. Some carry wooden clubs in addition to swords. Others bear nets clipped to their belts. Some wear no armor at all. The trainer circles. He stops behind you and taps your shoulder. He whispers 2 words. To the post. You nod. At your feet lies a wooden dummy carved in the shape of a human torso. Its arms jut at awkward angles, and an iron spike runs through its head. You raise your sword and slash at the dummy's chest. The blade bites into wood and slides free. You follow with a thrust at the spike below. The sword shivers as it strikes iron. You pull free and spin. You face the next opponent, whose shield bears a crude emblem of a wolf. You step toward him, shield raised. He charges. You block his shield with yours, and feel the clank of metal on metal. You bring the flat of your blade down across his shield. He staggers, but recovers. You both circle, swords raised. The trainer blows a whistle. You thrust forward and your blade jabs at flesh. You slow, tighten your grip, and strike again. The whistle sounds twice, and you both lower weapons. You nod at each other, offering silent respect. The sun climbs high, and the testing continues. You spar with different men, each blade unique, each shield worn. You learn to sense each weapon's texture and balance. You learn that no armor can stop a well-placed strike. You learn that your own guard must become as strong as steel. At dusk, the trainer dismisses you. You gather your sword and shield and return them to the crate. You notice the trainer's eyes lingering on you before he turns away. You feel a spark of pride. You gather your armor pieces and carry them back to the barracks. The weight of each piece presses on your arms, shoulders, and head. You brace beneath their burden. You slip into the narrow doorway and step back into the cool shadow of the corridor. Inside the barracks, you lay your gear on a low bench. You inspect each piece by torchlight, wiping away grime and blood from the day's drills. Some dents you leave as reminders of progress. You tally the splinters from shield strikes and the scratches on each blade. You nod to yourself. Tomorrow you will return. Tomorrow you will test again. For in each swing of dull steel and in each bite of crude armor, you forge the man you must become. And only in that forging can you hope to survive a single day in the arena. You slip back into the barracks after the day's trials, your gear still heavy in your arms. You lay each piece carefully on the rough wooden bench. The leather straps of your cuirass are stiff and cracked. You lift the metal greaves and examine their inside surfaces. Sweat and grime have caked into every seam. You wipe them down with a scrap of cloth, working at each buckle until the iron gleams faintly. You test their fit again, sliding your foot into the greave and wrapping the leather straps snug around your calf. You flex your knee and feel the metal yield just enough to bend with your leg. You nod to yourself. This armor must move with you if it is to protect you. You pick up the leather corset that serves as a breastplate. It is made of thick hide with thin plates riveted inside. You wrap it around your torso and pull the laces tight. The hide bites into your sides. You draw in a breath and adjust the straps until you can breathe without pain. You test each buckle, pulling on the strap to ensure it will hold under stress. You imagine an axe swinging down upon you. You press your fist to the hide and feel the firmness of the plates beneath. You swallow and slip the breastplate back off, laying it gently on the bench. You know every piece of gear will be tested tomorrow in the arena yard. A small chest sits beside the bench. You open it and find a bundle of cloth pads and linen strips. These are your padding. You pull out a pad and wrap it around your left shoulder, where the breastplate once pinched. You bind it tight so it will cushion each blow. The cloth smells faintly of sweat and salt. You dip your finger in a bucket of water and dab at the cloth so it will mold to your body. You repeat on your right shoulder and around your waist. You feel each fold of cloth create a barrier between metal and flesh. You step back and glance at yourself in a shard of broken mirror on the wall. The picture is grim but functional. Night falls, and the barracks grow hushed. Only the soft coughs and distant creaks of wood break the silence. You gather your sword and shield again, and step back into the corridor. A single torch flickers at the end of the passage. You carry your gear toward the small forge tucked into a corner room. The blacksmith stands by an anvil, hammer in hand. He nods when you enter. You set your sword on a wooden stand. He lifts it and runs his thumb along the blade's fuller. He murmurs something you do not understand. He sets the sword on the anvil and strikes it with his hammer. Sparks fly and heat rises against your face. You step closer to examine his work. Each hammer blow straightens the spine of the blade and tightens its weave. The blacksmith works the metal as though coaxing it to endure. When he finishes, he wipes the blade and hands it back. You lift the sword and feel the difference. The weight is nearly the same, but the balance has shifted. The point now follows your arm with greater ease. You lift your shield and test its bracing arm. You squeeze the handle and press the shield against your forearm. You twist your torso. The shield moves smoothly with you. You nod at the blacksmith. He merely shrugs and returns to his anvil. Outside the forge, you find a bucket of oil and a rag. You dip the rag and smear oil along each blade's length. The metal gleams wet in the torchlight. You work in silence, covering each sword and the trident and the curved dagger you keep for emergencies. You test each weapon separately, lifting each and swinging it in an arc. You note how the oil makes the metal slide through your hand more easily. You relish the feel of steel against your palm. You replace each weapon on the rack, then turn to your armor pieces. You take the shield and run a strip of linen around its iron rim. You knot it tightly so that if the rim cracks under impact, the cloth will keep the pieces together. You set the shield down and press the fitting of your vambrace. The leather straps are worn nearly through. You remove a small shard of wood from the strap and replace it with a fresh billet carved from a broken spear shaft. You wrap the billet in cloth and tie the strap again. You test the tension by raising and lowering your arm. It holds firm. As you finish your work, a trainer enters the forge with 2 other recruits. He nods at you and directs them toward a pile of chain shirts. The mail is made of interlocking rings. The recruits bend and slip the shirt over their heads. The rings clink softly as they move. You watch as they adjust the hauberk until it hangs just below the knee. The weight presses on their shoulders. They tighten the belt around their waists to bear the load. The trainer tests each shirt by swinging a wooden mace at the hem. The chain rings absorb the blow. Sparks fly as the wooden mace splinters against metal. You step forward and lift a sleeve of mail to your face. You part the rings and peer inside. You see jagged edges where rust has eaten through. You wash the mail in a bucket of water and scrub each link with a wire brush. When you finish, the surface is rough but free of corrosion. You hang the mail on a peg to dry. You know that a ring left rusting can break open under impact, inviting death. Outside the forge, you see the barracks guard heading your way. He steps in and snaps his fingers at you. He hands you a roll of parchment. You unroll it and read your match schedule for tomorrow's drills. You are paired with a man who fought yesterday's exhibition match. He stands near the forge, stripping off his armor and sweat-soaked tunic. His body is marked with bruises and faded scars. You catch his eye and nod. He lifts a brow and shrugs. No words pass between you, only the understanding that tomorrow you will test this gear in earnest. You return to the bench and slip into your armor once more. The breastplate, the mail shirt, the greaves, the vambraces. You secure each strap and knot the padding beneath. You lift your sword and shield and stand before the mirror shard. The metal shines beneath the torchlight. You study your reflection. Your face is bloodless and sharp. Your eyes are hard with determination. You catch your breath and slide the sword into its scabbard at your hip. You hang the shield from its strap on your back. You step back and feel the weight settle across your body. You walk to the doorway and step into the night air. The moon glints on paving stones beyond the barracks gate. The walls loom tall and silent. You hear only the distant murmur of night watchmen. You taste oil and sweat on your tunic. You lift your eyes to the sky and feel the weight of every piece of gear you carry. You know each swing of sword and block of shield could be your last. Yet you stand ready. You adjust your guard stance and inhale the cool air. You make your silent vow. Tomorrow you will test this gear in the sand. You will survive. You will endure. And you will wield these crude weapons and worn armor until the crowd roars your name or the sand drinks your blood. You exhale and step back into the barracks, ready to sleep beneath the weight of steel and leather that might one day save your life. You stand at the edge of the tunnel, your sandals pressed into sand that feels warmer than the midday sun. The roar hits you first, a living wave of sound that pounds against your chest. You gulp in a breath and taste sweat and dust. Your heart hammers like a war drum in your ribs. Every muscle trembles beneath your tunic and beneath the weight of your shield and sword. You wipe a bead of sweat from your brow and raise your chin. The light at the tunnel's end blazes brilliant and white against your eyes. The wooden gates swing open with a loud crack that echoes through your bones. You step forward into the blinding light. The roar sharpens into a chorus of voices. You blink once, twice, until shapes emerge from the glare. A sea of faces in stone seats hundreds deep. Men in togas wave rings of cloth. Women clutch fans and lean forward. Children perch on shoulders, straining for a glimpse. 1,000 pairs of eyes fix on you. You feel their gaze like hot brand against your skin. You lift your shield and sword for the salute the herald taught you. Your arm shakes. The herald stands near the center, spear in hand, his armor gleaming. He nods once and raises his spear. The crowd hushes, as though the sound itself held its breath. You lower your weapons and squat into guard position. The sand shifts beneath your feet, each grain a witness to 1,000 fights before yours. You taste salt on your tongue and grit behind your teeth. A second set of gates on the opposite side of the arena groans open. Your opponent steps through. He is taller and broader. His cuirass gleams bronze, and his helmet's crest sweeps back like a wave. He carries a heavy sword that glints even in this light. He raises a hand to acknowledge the audience, and they roar again. His eyes sweep the stands, then settle on you. You see no fear there, only resolve sharpened by many trials you have not yet faced. You rise up and drop into a wider stance. The herald raises his spear once more. You hear the crowd's murmur fade into silence. The herald's spear lowers, and his hand flicks toward the sand. The gates clang shut. The final seal on your fate. You strike your chest with the flat of your blade out of habit, then lower it. The silence fills you with dread and focus. Every nerve awaits the first move. You shift your shield to your left arm and feel its leather strap bite into your skin. You adjust your grip on the sword's hilt until the wood rests just so in your palm. You sway slightly and taste iron in the air. The crowd leans forward. You can almost hear their breath. You step toward the center, as though drawn by an unseen force. Your sandals sink into the sand, and you feel the weight of every step. He moves first, a single, lunging step that closes half the distance between you. You raise your shield just in time. The dull thunk of sword on shield echoes. Sand sprays beneath your feet. You taste the grit of wood and leather. You bend your knees and twist your torso, directing the force into the shield's metal rim. You feel the impact jolt up your arm. You grit your teeth and step around him, pressing a light cut toward his thigh. He shifts his shield in the nick of time, and your blade scrapes harmlessly along bronze. He grunts and steps forward again. You parry his second strike, blade against blade. The clang reverberates beneath the stands. You match your pace to his and swing low in a feint. He raises his shield to block, and you thrust upward beneath its edge. The sword scrapes against leather padding. You feel its raw tip press against your ribs. You yank it free and spin back. He barks something you cannot hear over the sand's hush. You both step back and set your guard. The crowd murmurs, then settles. You notice a flicker of movement in the stands and a cry from a woman in white. You sense that someone important sits nearby. You sense that each onlooker judges your skill and fate. You brush the thought aside. You focus on the man before you, whose arms glisten with sweat. His breath comes in measured pants. You step forward again. Your next strike is a slash, aimed at his shoulder. He twists his torso and parries with his sword's flat. Sparks fly as metal scrapes metal. You follow with a thrust that he blocks with shield. The leather strap cuts into his forearm. You sense a momentary hesitation. You seize it. You leap forward, sword high, and bring the pommel down into his shield's boss. The crash rings out. His shield shudders, and his eyes widen. He staggers, and you press forward. He raises his sword in desperation. You flick your blade sideways and nick his thigh. You taste blood and sand under your tongue. He He cries out and staggers back. You step forward and swing once more. He blocks again, but the force buckles the shield and he staggers. He raises a desperate arm to protect his head. You swing high, and your sword catches his helmet rim. Sparks fly. A deep dent appears in metal. He reels and almost topples. The roar rises again, frenzied now. You feel its heat as though the very stones shout your name. You press forward and bring your shield up to his face. You push. He slips. You spin on your heel, red dirt flying. You thrust upward. The blade slides between armor plates and sinks into flesh. You feel the impact snap beneath your palm. He gasps, then collapses on one knee. You step back, heart hammering so loud you fear it might burst free. You watch as he grips his thigh, crimson seeping between his fingers. The herald steps forward. He lifts his spear, and the crowd hushes. You lower your sword and stave, breathing hard. You turn away as though ashamed of the kill. You lift your hand to salute, but your arm shakes and you drop it. The herald nods once. The spear lowers. The crowd erupts into cheers and jeers, waves of sound that crash over you. You swallow hard and blink away sweat and blood. You take one step, then another, as though floating. You feel the weight of eyes and the taste of victory and dread. The herald raises his spear again. He motions toward your fallen opponent. 2 legionaries step forward and drag the man from the sand. You watch him stumble to the tunnel, head bowed. The crowd's cheers fade to whispers as the gates on your side swing shut. You stand alone in the center of the arena, the sand beneath your sandals a patchwork of footprints and bloodstains. You drop your sword into the sand. You lift your shield and rest it against your shoulder. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe deep. When you open them, the herald is gone. The gates remain closed. The roar drifts through the sand, through the stone. You taste grit and dust and sweat. You feel your heart pounding beneath your tunic. You gather your sword and shield and step toward the tunnel. Each step is heavier now, weighted by triumph and fear. You know this is only the first match. You know there will be more. But for now you carry the taste of victory in your throat and the roar in your ears. You emerge into the tunnel, blinking against dim light. You whisper a word of thanks to any god who might be listening, and quicken your pace. You have won this fight. Tomorrow a new battle awaits, and you will be ready. You stagger through the tunnel, shield clutched to your chest and sword dangling at your side. Each step echoes against damp stone walls. The torchlight flickers, casting your long shadow ahead. You taste sweat and blood in your mouth and grit under your nails. You force yourself not to stumble. You push onward, following the narrow corridor that leads back to the holding pen. At the pen's iron bars, you pause. You wipe the sand and blood from your face with the back of your hand. A guard unlatches the door with a harsh clang and shoves you inside. You step into the pen's gloom. The torches here burn low, and shadows pool in the corners. The other gladiators turn toward you, eyes shining. Some offer nods of respect. Others watch warily, as if curious how you claimed victory. You drop your sword and shield by the mud-stained wall, then sit on the sandy floor to catch your breath. A water-bearer enters with a wooden bucket. He splashes cold water into his palm and holds it to your lips. You drink deeply, the liquid splattering down your chin. You taste the raw tang of iron. You wipe your mouth and reach for the rough cloth he offers. You scrub the blood and sand from your face, pausing at each cut. Your fingers tremble over the shallow gash on your forearm. You press cloth to it and feel the sting of salt water against fresh flesh. The water-bearer moves on to the next man, leaving you to settle back into the pen's hush. You rise unsteadily and pace a small circle. The sand shifts beneath your sandals. You trace the arc of your path, as though it might steady your mind. Each step brings you closer to the bars, closer to the light above. You turn and look at the others. A veteran gladiator wraps a leather strap around his forearm, the same one you battered in combat. He meets your gaze and nods once. You nod back. No words pass between you. Only the unspoken bond of shared risk. You sink onto a low wooden crate. The lid creaks beneath your weight. You lift it and find rations inside. 2 chunks of stale bread and a small slab of salted pork. You unwrap the pork from rough cloth. You tear off a piece and bite down hard. The meat is tough, but still warm from the forge's brazier. You chew slowly, savoring each bite. You swallow and tear off more bread. You dip it in water and taste the mash that serves as dinner. Hunger and exhaustion mingle, urging you to eat quickly. You force down each morsel, though nausea churns in your gut. A trainer's voice booms through the pen's door. "Move," he commands. You rise and follow fellow gladiators into a second corridor. The air here is hotter, thick with the smell of incense and oil. You blink against the sudden brightness and emerge into a small courtyard beneath the stands. Here, legionaries stand guard. Between them is a wooden rack, hung with fresh tunics and simple cloaks. You step forward and claim the item marked with your number. The fabric is cool and clean. You slip off your blood-stained tunic and wring it out. You hang it beside the new garment. You pull on the fresh tunic and tie the leather cinch at your waist. The cloth settles across your shoulders like a promise. You dust sand and grit from your sandals and wipe your arms. You feel the weight of victory pressed between your shoulder blades and the ridged wood of your new cloak. You adjust the cloak's strap and tuck your sword's hilt beneath the fold. You let the cloak hang free across your back, its rough wool whispering against the sand. The courtyard gate opens, and you step into a narrow passage that leads up stone steps. Each step is worn smooth by centuries of feet. You ascend and hear the roar of the crowd swell like a wave. You push through an arched doorway into a side tunnel beneath the seating. The light here is dim, and the high ceiling curves overhead like the hull of a ship. You press your hand against the cool stone and walk single file toward a broader stairwell. As you climb, the light grows brighter. You emerge into a narrow walkway lined with iron grates. Through the grates, you glimpse the sunlit stands above. You see Facessum cheering, some jeering and flags rippling in the breeze. You look at your reflection in polished bronze plaques marking each gate. Your face is smeared with blood and sweat, but your eyes gleam with triumph and relief. You taste the roar again, faint but real. At the top of the stairs, you reach an opening that leads outside the arena. You step onto a broad ledge. Below you, the crowd fades away like a distant storm. A gentle breeze carries the scent of olive oil and fresh bread from nearby vendors. You blink against the glare and take in your surroundings. The soaring arches of the amphitheater, the broad plaza beyond, and the shifting patterns of sun and shadow on marble steps. You draw in a deep breath and let the air fill your lungs. A trainer appears behind you. He nods and hands you a bowl of water from a bronze font. You drink slowly, savoring each drop. You feel the water wash away the worst of the grime. You wipe your lips on the sleeve of your tunic. The trainer points toward a wooden exit gate marked Veterans. You turn and follow him. You walk along the outer passage that rings the amphitheater. Tradesmen and tourists mill about, unaware of the bloodshed that just occurred. A baker hands out small cakes in honey syrup. You catch one from a boy and bite off a piece. The sweetness surprises you, like hope. You swallow and smile despite yourself. You step through the exit gate into a quiet courtyard. The sunlight here is gentle. You see a row of stone benches and a small fountain where other victors stand. Some clear the sweat from their brows. Others stretch taut muscles beneath fresh cloaks. You join them. You press your palm into the fountain's edge and spill cool water over your arms. You close your eyes and let the droplets slide over bruises and cuts. A handful of men form a circle. They nod at you and beckon you to join. You step into the circle and extend a hand. They grasp it firmly, slapping your shoulder with pride. You feel the strength of their grips. You look at each face. Veterans with missing teeth, novices still wide-eyed, men carrying scars that might never heal. They share the same bond, now that of gladiators who tested blood and blade. A bearded veteran unwraps a leather satchel and pulls out a loaf of fresh bread. He breaks it into pieces and offers them around. You accept a piece and break it again for a younger combatant beside you. You share the loaf until only crumbs remain. You pat your comrades on the back and slump onto a bench. You pull back your cloak and inspect your wounds. The cut on your thigh has bled through fabric and still seeps. A scratch on your forearm stings as residual sand shifts beneath your skin. You press a strip of clean linen from your cloak over each wound. You wrap the bands tight and nod when the older gladiator offers spit for a makeshift disinfectant. You apply it and taste bitter copper in your mouth. A sound of trumpets rises from the plaza beyond. You hear the clang of bells and the cheers of a new audience. You feel the pull of the sand, the promise of another fight. You look at your fellow victors. They stand and adjust their cloaks. Their blades are sheathed. Their eyes flick toward the arena gates. The day's spectacle is not over. More matches await. You breathe deep, tightening the knots on your bandages. You stand and take a step forward. You move to where the trainer stands. He nods and places a hand on your shoulder. You drop your gaze to the sand at your feet. You feel both bone-tired and alive. You lift your eyes and catch the veteran's gaze. He nods again. You nod back. No words are needed. You walk back through the courtyard, past the fountain and the vendors. You step into the tunnel that leads beneath the stands. You descend stone steps, each footfall echoing. You emerge from the pen's barred gate and re-enter the gloom. You approach the bench where you left your sword and shield. You pick them up and heft their weight. The gear feels lighter now. You strap on the shield, secure the sword's hilt, and adjust your cloak. You step back into the pen. Inside, other gladiators ready themselves for the evening bouts. You line up and look at the mural on the wall paintings of past champions and fallen heroes. You trace the faded image of a champion crowned in laurel. His eyes gaze at you. You feel the weight of tradition, the curse of the arena, and the chance of glory. You raise your head and meet the veteran's eyes. He raises his sword in salute. You return the salute. The pen gate swings open again with a final clang. You grasp your sword and shield and step forward into the tunnel's light. The roar of the crowd greets you once more. You know what awaits, and you know that each step you take is a step deeper into the life or death game you have chosen. You step into the first flicker of torchlight and let the sand claim you once again. You wake before dawn and feel the ground tremble. The air in the training yard tastes thick with dust and anticipation. You rise from your pallet and dress in light gear. You leave your shield behind and strap a short sword to your belt. Your heart pounds as you step into the sand. You sense that today you will not face another man, but beasts born of tooth and claw. The trainers herd you, and a handful of fellow gladiators toward a low gate at the edge of the arena. Beyond it lies a sunken pit filled with fallen leaves and loose earth. At its center stands a wooden platform. The crowd's roar fades into a tense hush as you approach. You swallow hard and feel sweat bead on your skin. The trainer's whip cracks and you step forward onto the platform. You strain to see into the gloom below. A trapdoor swings open. You hear the clatter of metal bars and the scuff of heavy paws. A lion's roar rumbles through the pit. You taste fear as though it were salt on your tongue. You raise your chin and grip the hilt of your sword. The lion emerges, its golden mane bristling, its eyes fixed on you. You feel your breath catch. The lion steps into the open and shakes its head. Dust swirls around its paws. Its muscles ripple beneath tawny fur. You feel the crowd's gaze sharpen. You stand firm, feet planted in the sand. You raise your sword overhead and spit onto the ground. You taste grit and dust. The lion snarls and lowers its head. You tighten your grip. The trainer's whistle blows. You lunge forward with measured step. You strike at the lion's flank. Your blade thuds against flesh and fur. The lion bellows and spins. You plant your feet and brace your shield against the impact. The beast's shoulder slams into your shield, and you stumble. Pain lances through your arm. You shake your shoulders to clear the daze. You circle the lion, gauging its mood. It yawns and bares its teeth. You step closer and thrust upward. Your sword slides between its ribs and catches a trickle of blood. The lion roars in pain and lashes out with a paw. Its claws rake your shield and gouge deep grooves. You stagger back and resist the urge to drop to your knees. Your opponent rears, and you respond with a low slash at its haunch. You taste iron again, the lion's fur parts, and you feel the pull of its muscles. It staggers but does not fall. You wipe sweat from your brow and steady your breathing. Your arm shakes as you raise your sword again. You lunge forward and drive your sword under its chest. The blade sinks until the hilt clatters against fur. The lion shudders and collapses onto the sand. The crowd's roar returns in waves of relief and awe. You stand over the beast, chest rising and falling. You pull your blade free and wipe it on sand. You spin and salute the crowd. The gates on the opposite side swing open. You step back and bow to the fallen lion. Two handlers enter and drag the carcass away. You watch until only blood and sand remain. The trainer nods and motions you to the other side of the arena. You march across the sand to another gate. Beyond it lies the bear pit. A low growl echoes as a massive bear lumbers into view. Its fur is matted with dust and sweat. Its eyes glint with ancient hunger. You grip your sword with white knuckles and square your shoulders. The bear charges with terrifying speed. You step aside and swing at its flank. The blade catches flesh and fur. The bear bellows and swipes a massive paw. The roar of claws on sand is deafening. You raise your shield and feel the wind from the strike buffet your body. You stagger back and hold your shield high. The bear hovers at the edge of the attack circle. Its breath steams in the morning light. You lower your blade and nod at the beast. You step forward and feint to the left. The bear shifts its weight. You strike low at its flank. The blade sinks deep, and the bear howls. You press your advantage and strike again. The bear staggers and claws at the ground. You back away and lift your shield. The beast lunges. You block with shield and counter with a strike to the neck. Your blade cuts through hair and flesh. You feel the resistance of bone. The bear falters and collapses. The crowd erupts. You stand over the fallen beast, chest heaving. You wipe your blade on sand and salute. The handlers return and drag the bear away. You breathe deep, taste the heaviness of victory and the sting of fatigue. A third gate opens, and you face a leopard. It slinks into the sand, lithe and savage. You grip your sword and lower your shield. You know this fight will be swift. The leopard springs. You flick your blade at its path. The blade catches muscle, and the cat stops in mid-leap. It spins and slashes at your leg. You fall backward and feel a hot sting. You scramble to your feet and raise your sword. The leopard circles you, eyes cold. You lunge and drive the blade between its shoulder blades. The cat snarls and claws at your arm. You feel your tunic tear. Pain flares. You block with your shield and strike at its throat. Sand sprays, and the cat's roar falters. You finish the strike as the beast collapses. You stand in the center of the sand, sword raised. The crowd roars and torches dance in response. You bow low and taste dust and sweat. You have faced lion, bear, and leopard. You have drawn blood from each. You have survived. You have earned this moment in the sun. You turn and salute again. The gates close one final time. You lift your shield and walk toward the tunnel, your heart pounding, your body soaked in sweat and fear, yet standing tall. You step into the sand, with your heart still racing from the final roar of the beast hunt. The arena feels different now. Every stone beneath your feet hums with expectation. You rise to face the tears that stretch up like a mountain of faces. You taste dust in the air, and the faint tang of sweat from hundreds of bodies pressed close together. You lift your chin and feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon you. They cheer for you, or jeer at you, or debate your worth in shouts that swirl around your head like a gale. You lower your gaze to the oath lines carved into the sand. Each line marks the boundary between life and death. You steady your breathing and lift the edge of your shield. The iron glints in the sun as though alive. You draw your sword and heft it once to feel its promise. The crowd roars again, as if summoned by your motion. You raise your hand and offer the standard salute. Your arm shakes from muscle fatigue and adrenaline. You remind yourself that this gesture binds you to them. Each shout and hiss shapes your fate as surely as the blade at your side. You scan the stands. You see the wives of senators draped in silken wraps. Their fans flutter like trapped birds. You see soldiers in polished loricae. Their shields bear the eagle of Rome. They lean forward in unison. You see merchants in bright cloaks shouting wages at each other. Their coins clink in purses and vanish in eager palms. You see common folk with faces painted white and red. They tally your strikes and counts with wet tongues. Each face marks a verdict on your skill, courage, or shame. You feel a hand press into your shoulder. A trainer stands beside you. He whispers a warning that slips through the thunder of the crowd. You nod, though. You barely hear his words. You taste the salt of sweat at the back of your throat and the grit of fear. You flick your eyes to the imperial box above. The emperor sits with magistrates on either side. His breastplate gleams with gold and purple. He gestures once. You know that his finger can grant you victory or death. Each motion he makes ripples through the crowd like a silent decree. You shift your shield to brace for the next combatants. Today, you will face another gladiator, not a beast. You see him step from the opposite gate. He is a veteran of the sands with scars like copper rivers across his chest. He raises his sword in a salute that echoes yours. The crowd splits with sound. Some shout your name, some shout his. Some shout wages you cannot see but feel in the sudden pressure of air. You take a step forward and your sandals sink into the hot sand. You hear the horses of the chariot parades beyond the arena walls. You smell incense burning in the emperor's box. You taste the bitterness of wine that drips from a merchant's cup. You steady your blade and square your shoulders. You remind your muscles that they must obey each command without question. You remind your heart that pounding means you are still alive. The herald's trumpet rings out. The crowd hushes in a moment that cracks the world in two. You freeze in place and feel the sun's glare burn your skin. You lower your blade just enough. The other gladiator does the same. You sense the silent gamble of power and blood that the emperor places on your match. His eyes never leave you. You know he counts each breath you take. The trumpet sounds again and you lunge. Your sword flashes like a sliver of sunlight. You aim for his rib, but he twists away. The crowd exhales in relief and cheers for his skill. You feel the blow of his counterstrike on your side. You grit your teeth and press forward. Each clash of sword on sword rings like a bell tolling your fate. You step back and let him thrust. You block with your shield. Sand sprays against your leg, and you taste grit again. You push him with brute force. You feel his arm give way. The crowd's roar rises like a storm. You strike again. The blade bites into leather, and you feel his gasp. He stumbles back. The Emperor leans forward. His hand curves toward your name. You step in and deliver a final thrust beneath his shield. He falls, and his sword clatters against the sand. The crowd erupts. You salute again. Your arm trembles from exertion and victory. You back away as the herald raises his spear. The crowd halts its roar, and then erupts again. You lower your blade and shield, and sweep your hand toward the Emperor's box. He rises. You see him remove a small stick from a pouch and roll it between his fingers. Rumor says this stick bears a crimson tip if life is spared, or a white tip if death is demanded. He unfurls it and shows the crowd the crimson end. The arena fills with relief. You bow again and feel tears prick your eyes beneath sweat. You step toward the exit tunnel. As you pass beneath the imperial box, the Emperor inclines his head. You see the magistrates lean forward in nods of respect. The senators clap heavy hands against marble. Merchants shout your name, alongside coins and wagers. You feel the frenzy of their voices and the price of their bet upon your life. You enter the tunnel, and the sand gives way to stone. Torches gutter in wall sconces. You feel the weight of your sword and shield shift as you walk. You taste gratitude and greed in the air. You wonder how many purses emptied on your triumph. You wonder how many voices call your name now for favor or for cruelty. You emerge into the pen, and your comrades turn to salute your victory. Some grasp your arm in congratulations. Others wipe their blades against their tunics in envy. You clap a hand on the veteran's shoulder. He nods and points to the ivory token you carry that marks you as a victor. You slide the token from your belt and hang it on the pen wall. You return his nod and catch your breath. A stable master enters with fresh gear. He offers a new sword with a sharper edge and a shield bound in bright leather. He reminds you that each emperor's favor grows with each match. You lift the sword and heft it. You feel the balance shift beneath your palm. You accept the gear and bite your lip. You carry the new blade like a promise. You carry the favor like a chain. You return to your pallet and undo your belt. You place sword and token on the bench. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes. You taste sand, sweat, and fear, mingled with the sweetness of victory. You feel the echo of cheers in your chest. You imagine the next match and the next emperor's whim. You remind yourself that politics rules the blood of the arena. You remind yourself that you dance to the cheers and jeers of thousands while emperors wager your fate. You lie back on straw and let darkness gather behind your eyelids. You hear the distant rumble of the crowd preparing for the next spectacle. You sense the shifting sands of power and blood beneath them. You slip into a dream where you stand alone in the center of the arena. You raise your sword to face the blazing sun, and you taste the echo of 1,000 voices. You step forward into the light once more. You wake to the scent of stale water and sour sweat. The barracks are quiet, except for the creaking of timbers and distant drip of water from cracked walls. You sit up on your straw mattress and press a hand to your side. A dull ache pulses where the bear's claw cut deep. You taste salt on your lips and feel dried blood crusting along the cut. Each breath draws fire into your lungs and you grit your teeth against nausea. A lamp's flicker casts movement across the far wall. You stand and stumble toward the basin. You fill your hands with cold water and splash it onto the wound. The sting nearly drops you to your knees. You grip the edge of the basin and close your eyes. You let the water wash away the worst of the grime and feel the raw flesh beneath. You step back to your pallet and pull off your tunic. The wound is ragged and raw. Flesh peeks beneath torn skin, and a thin thread of pus glints in the lamp's light. You swallow the urge to retch and press a strip of linen against your bleeding side. You tie it tight and move to the chest where crude medicine waits. A fellow gladiator kneels beside a low table. He wears a leather apron, and his hands shake. He dips a rag in a small bowl of oil and holds it out. You take it and press it to the cut. The oil warms as it seeps into the wound. You breathe shallow and press the rag into flesh that pulls and tugs at your nerves. You whisper a prayer to any god who might listen. He steps aside and offers you a jar of crushed herbs steeped in vinegar. You lift the jar and sniff. The scent is bitter and sour. You press a few drops onto the rag and dab the wound again. The vinegar hisses against the oil. You feel the flesh contract and tighten. You grit your teeth and hold still until the pain dulls to a throbbing ache. You swallow hard and nod. The gladiator turns to tend another man whose leg is bandaged like a sausage. You strip your leggings and wipe your thigh where the leopard's claws gouged you. The skin is raw and angry. You press oil and herb into that wound as well. You taste the bitterness deep in your nose. You step back and feel sweat bead on your forehead. A sudden knock at the door brings half the men scrambling into arms. A trainer enters with a linen roll. He lays it on the table and opens it to reveal iron instruments. You recognize saws and probes and a cup of heated metal that glints red. You step back as he selects a long clamp. You feel your heart race. Surgical tools in the ludus mean only one thing: infection or shattered bone. He strides toward you and points at your side wound. You swallow. He grips your strip of linen and yanks it free. You gasp and drop to one knee. He clamps the skin at the cut's edge and pulls it taut. You taste blood and grit again. He brings a heated probe close and sears a bit of flesh that drips oily ash. You scream into your fist and taste smoke in your mouth. The pain throbs like a drumbeat that will never end. He swaps the clamp for a needle threaded with coarse thread. He pulls the edges of the cut together and guides the needle through flesh that pulls and tears. You taste iron as the thread slices your tongue. He stitches one end, then the other. Each pull tightens flesh until the skin puckers and bleeds at the knots. When he finishes, he wipes the blood away and covers the cut with fresh linen. You feel the bandage bind your breath. You gasp until the trainer steps back. You sink to the mattress and press a hand to your side. The pain rockets from your ribs to your shoulder. You taste tears behind your eyes. A comrade sets a bowl of broth beside you. He offers a wooden spoon. You take it and sip. The warm liquid soothes your throat. You taste grain and faint meat. You close your eyes and savor each swallow. Night falls and torches gutter. The barracks grow still once more. You rub your jaw and lean back against the wall. You run a finger along the fresh stitches. The knots feel knobbly beneath your skin. You press where the probe seared. You wince. You close your eyes and press palms to your temples. Overhead, the rafters creak and you hear scuffling feet. A gladiator staggers in, his leg wrapped in bloodied cloth. He drops to the floor and moans. You recognize him from yesterday's match. You crawl toward him and rest a hand on his arm. His eyes meet yours and he nods once. You press more oil into his leg and whisper that dawn brings medicine. You rise and stagger toward the corner where a basin of water sits. You dip a rag once more and return to your comrade. You press the rag to his leg and tie a fresh strip of linen around the soaked cloth. He breathes easier. You sit back and sip your broth. From outside, you hear trumpets in the distance. You straighten and taste dread in your gut. Each match casts a shadow over this place. You swallow the broth and stand. You pull on your tunic and secure a new bandage around your side. You slide your sword belt across your hip. You feel its weight like a promise. You will fight again. You will not die here. You step into the corridor where guards pace. You lean against the wall and let your sword rest by your side. You feel the knot in your side and taste steel in your mouth. A guard passes and nods. You nod back. No words are needed. You know dawn brings the next spectacle and possibly your final one. You navigate the maze of tunnels and climb the stone steps to the courtyard. Your bandaged side aches with each step. You swallow hard and press a hand to the stair rail. The sun peeks through the gate and you feel its warmth. You step into the courtyard and find a trainer waiting with a basket of oil and herbs. He nods and gestures for you to follow. You kneel on the stone, and he lifts your tunic. He inspects the stitches and nods approvingly. He applies fresh oil and herbs. The sewn flesh glistens beneath the lamp. He wipes his hands and hands you a loaf of bread for breakfast. You accept it and break off a piece. You taste grain and salt. You thank him with a nod and he steps back. You rise and shoulder your sword. You taste iron and vinegar in the air. You step toward the gate leading back to the pen. You pause and glance up at the marble walls. You imagine the crowd leaning forward, hungry for more blood. You taste fear again. Yet you step inside, and the gate's close behind you. Inside the pen, your comrades stand in rows. They nod at you. You nod back. You lift your blade and salute the empty center. Each step toward it echoes like a heartbeat. You taste fear and hope entangled in the sand. You will return to that spot, bleed again perhaps. But for now you walk forward, wounds bound, craving healing, hoping to find strength to face another day. You wake before dawn to the sound of voices in the corridor. The barracks are quiet, but for low murmurs and the soft scuffle of sandals on stone, you pull on your tunic and step into the dim light. Your side still throbs beneath the bandages. You press a hand to the linen strip and feel the knot of pain beneath. You breathe deep and force your legs to carry you toward the central area where gladiators gather. In the courtyard, a circle of men crouches around a small fire. They share rations and stories. You step forward, and one of them gestures for you to join. You settle on a low stool beside the fire. The air smells of sweat and tobacco. A man with a scar across his cheek breaks bread and passes half to you. You accept it and tear off a chunk. You taste grain and salt. A second man dips a strip of salted pork into hot broth and hands it to you on a piece of wood. You bite it and taste oil and meat. You nod in thanks. The circle shifts as other gladiators emerge from the barracks. Some carry swords at their sides in sheaths. Others strap on greaves and vambraces. A trainer strides through and barks orders. He names rivals for tomorrow's matches. Each gladiator's name draws a murmur. You sense the tension as names are paired. Each man in the circle glances at the next man, as though weighing his skill, strength, and resilience. When your name is called, you stand. The man beside you tightens his grip on the eating bowl. He looks at you with an unreadable expression. Is it envy or camaraderie? You cannot tell. You nod at him and step forward. He stands and follows. You walk together through the archway into the training yard. The sun has risen, and the yard gleams with fresh sand. Trainers hold court at the center. They toss scrolls and shout names again. You and your rival find your assigned circle. You raise your shield and grasp your sword. The crowd beyond the walls begins to stir with anticipation. You taste dust and sweat as you step forward. The trainer blows a horn. You and your rival salute. Your shields meet with a clang, and you press forward. Your swords slice the air. You parry his strike and counter with a thrust. He blocks with shield and shifts his stance. You feel the weight of his gaze as much as his weapon. You step back and circle him. Each of your steps sends sand flying. The trainer's horn blows again, and you plunge your blade low. He dodges and strikes your side. You taste pain and press shield against your ribs. The crowd's roar lifts above the walls. You exchange blows again and again. Each strike rings like a bell tolling your fate. You and your rival battle, not just for victory, but for the favor of the emperor and the crowd. Each cheer inflates your confidence. Each hiss deflates it. You clash swords until your arms ache. He drops his guard for a moment, and you drive your sword through the soft padding above his greave. He staggers back, and you press the advantage. The final horn blows, and you lower your sword. You step back and salute. He lowers his shield and salutes you. The trainer orders him to the side and calls you forward. You stand alone in the center. The crowd's roar builds to a crescendo. You raise your sword overhead and wait for the Emperor's sign. You taste dust and sweat and adrenaline. The Emperor nods, and the roar becomes a wave that crashes over your soul. You lower your sword and step toward the exit. Your rival glances at you with narrowed eyes. You look away. You know that next time he may face you again and wish you dead. You step into the tunnel and the sand gives way to stone. You pass niches where other gladiators wait. You slide into the barracks and hang your sword on its peg. You remove your shield and clean sand from its rim. You stand alone beside the bench and press a fist to your ribs. Later you return to the fire circle. The scarred man offers fresh bread again. He watches your wounds and nods. You take the bread and break it into pieces. You dip it in stew and swallow. You study each face in the circle. Some wear fresh scars. Others bear medals of laurel or iron tokens for survival. They are your brothers now. You share the same life of blood and sand, yet each of them is also your rival. Each meal shared may end with one of you in the arena together. A new recruit enters the circle. He is young and wide-eyed. He trembles as hardened men nod greetings. You pass him a piece of salted pork. He accepts it with shaking fingers. You pat his shoulder. He looks at you with awe. You see yourself in his uncertainty. You remember your first match and the fear and exhilaration. You know the bond forged in blood will heal slowly for him. You wonder if he will betray you to win the crowd's favor. Night falls, and the brazier's light flickers. You rise and stretch your muscles. You feel each bruise and cut throb in harmony with your heartbeat. A trainer appears and orders the circle broken. You stand and follow him down the corridor toward the infirmary. You open the door and smell oil and vinegar. You step inside, and a surgeon beckons. He wipes his hands on a rag. He points at your side wound and at the rival's cut on his thigh. You and your fellow gladiator lie on low tables side by side. The surgeon steams rags in hot oil and places them on each wound. You hiss at the sting and press your hand to your mouth. You taste oil and vinegar. The surgeon mumbles instructions and you nod. A cup of crushed garlic and salt is pressed into your palm. You spread it into the wound where the blade pierced. You see your rival glance at your hand and the garlic rubbed into your flesh. You meet his glance and nod. You share a silent acknowledgement of the pain and healing. When the surgeon leaves you both alone, you lie back and close your eyes. You taste oil and sweat and dust on your lips. You feel the rough cloth beneath you. You sense your rival's breath beside you. You imagine the next match. You imagine the day you might face each other again in the sand. You imagine the thrill and the terror. You wonder if your bond can endure the betrayal that may come. You lift your head and turn to him. He lies still, focusing on the torchlight flickering above. You reach out and tap his arm. He opens his eyes and meets your gaze. You offer a half smile. He nods and returns the smile. You lay your head back and exhale. You know the knife's edge between brotherhood and betrayal never dulls in this life. You know tomorrow will bring new matches. You know the arena will test each bond and each blade. You sink back into darkness and drift towards sleep, bound to your brothers by blood and betrayal alike. You wake in the pre-dawn hush to torches flickering along the walls of the ludus. Today is no ordinary day. Today is a grand festival day. You dress quickly in polished armor and check your sword's balance. You braid your hair tight against your scalp and wrap fresh linen strips around your forearms. You taste blood and sweat at the back of your throat and swallow deep. Outside the barracks, the air quivers with excitement. Hundreds of gladiators line the corridors, each stepping forward in ranks that stretch like living veins of steel. You follow the sound of drums beating a thunderous march. You emerge into the courtyard and see the Emperor's chariot, drawn by white horses at the center. His golden crest gleams even before dawn. Banners snap overhead. Torches burn in iron sconces. The sky is a pale blue curtain behind marble arches. You join your squad as trainers shout last-minute orders. You raise your shield to catch the torchlight. You lift your sword high and salute the Emperor's box. He inclines his head and waves a jeweled finger. The crowd beyond the walls shouts in response. You hear the clash of metal as weapons are tested and shields clank under the sun. The gates open and you step into a broad tunnel whose walls are carved with images of past champions. You steel your nerves and walk toward the arena. You emerge through the tunnel into a sea of faces. Thousands upon thousands fill the seats that rim the sand. They crowd shoulder to shoulder. They wave flags of crimson and gold. They shout your names like thunder. You stand at the edge of the sand field. The marble beneath your sandals is warmed by torches that line the perimeter. You feel the heat rise. The crowd's roar swells like a tidal wave. You taste dust and sweat and fear in your mouth. You raise your shield and sword in salute. The herald's trumpet blares and the roar crescendos. You step across the threshold onto sand that shifts beneath your feet. Blood from earlier bouts mats the grains dark. You know that soon your own blood may mingle with it. You hear the trumpets again, and the gates on the far side swing open. Dozens of exotic beasts lumber into view. You tense for the clash of tusks and roar of predator. Then the beasts are driven back, and banners wave. The trumpets sound again, and a second gate opens. Dozens of chariots race in, their wheels flaring sparks beneath the torches. Charioteers stand in shining helmets, their horses red-eyed from the morning sweat. They circle the field. They stir the crowd's frenzy. They drive the sand into a blaze. The Emperor stands and raises a cup of wine. He throws its contents into the sand field. The wine glimmers and pools in crimson rivulets. The crowd leaps to their feet. You raise your shield and shout with them. You taste the fruit of the wine sweet on your tongue. Then the trumpets sound again. The chariots roar past you. You raise your sword for the salute. You touch shield to helmet and step back. You wait for the final spectacle. You see squads of armored men file in from both sides. They bear spears and nets and curved blades. They are your allies and your rivals. You meet their eyes and nod once, a silent greeting of steel. The Emperor gestures again. The trumpets blare a final call. The men surge forward. You charge as one living river of shields and swords. The torches flare overhead and swords flash like lightning. You strike first at an opponent who lunges at you with a spear. You raise your shield, the wood groaning beneath the impact. You thrust your sword under his shield and feel the rip of flesh. You taste iron on your tongue. He wrenches free and snarls. You brace for his counterstrike. Behind you, another gladiator cries out. He parries a curved blade that cuts a lock of hair from his head. He spins and strikes back, his sword flashing against metal. You turn and see the exquisite violence of the fight. You step forward and join the rhythm of blades clashing under torches. Sparks fly from steel, and sand flies from each footstep. The crowd's roar becomes a living entity that ebbs and flows with every strike. You feel it in your chest, in your bones. You fight as part of a great machine of war and blood. You move across the sand field, striking down foes, parrying blows, pressing forward where others retreat. You feel the weight of the Emperor's favor in each breath you draw. You step onto a raised platform in the center. A champion stands there, his armor crowned with laurel. He waves his sword in challenge. You raise your own and step forward. He grins beneath his helmet. The crowd hushes again. You test each other's guard. You lunge. He dodges. Your swords circle each other like dancers. You strike low. He blocks high. Sparks fly in brilliant arcs beneath the torches. You press forward with fury and drive him back. His shield cracks beneath your blows. His foot catches in the sand. You lunge and tangle your blade in the gap of his armor. You drive the sword beneath his plate and he groans. He drops to one knee. You step back and raise your sword overhead. The crow roars as one living beast. You lower your blade. You salute the crowd. The emperor waves again. He shows a crimson cloth. The crowd roars approval. You feel the press of thousands in your chest. You raise your sword and salute him. He smiles and points. You bow low and turn back to the sand. The next spectacle is a mock naval battle. The sand is flooded with water from hidden pipes. You stand knee-deep in water that splashes cold beneath your sandals. You grip a short trident. You face an opponent on a raised wooden raft. The sand is churned into churned brown foam. Torches reflect in rivulets that swirl around you. The crowd hushes. The herald's trumpet sounds. You step forward and fight your reflection in the water, and the man who stands across from you. Your trident whips through water and strikes his thigh. He roars and counters with a net. The net tangles your legs and you stagger. You raise sword and cut the net free. Water sprays in shimmering arcs. You charge. You thrust your sword beneath his shield and he topples. You shake water from your hair as you salute the crowd. You step free of the flooded sand. You shake the water from your tunic. You taste salt and blood and adrenaline. Torches drip wax onto marble. You hear the clang of trumpets again. You follow the signal for the final bout. The final bout is a free-for-all. Dozens of gladiators enter at once. You grip your sword and shield and stand at the edge. The crowd rises to its feet. The torches blaze overhead like a sky of fire. A great gong sounds. You step forward into the swirl of shields and steel. You move as though in a dream. You strike one man, dodge another. You feel the rhythm of 1,000 blades. You taste salt and metal. You breathe hard. You fight for survival. The gong sounds again and the free for all ends. The surviving gladiators stand panting in a circle. You lift your sword overhead. You salute the emperor once more. He nods and waves a crimson cloth. The crowd roars its approval. You feel triumph wash over you, and then fatigue. You leave the sand and walk the corridors beneath the stands. The walls drip with torchlight. You see the faces of defeated gladiators on benches, their armor thrown aside. You nod to a friend who lies bruised and bloody. He offers a weak smile. You clasp his arm and help him to his feet. You emerge into the barracks and hang your sword. You strip off armor and step into a tub of warm water. You feel each scrape and cut sting as water touches it. You scrub the sand and blood from your skin. You rinse and step onto fresh straw. You dress in fresh linen and lie on your pallet. You taste wax smoke in your nose. You hear distant drumming as the festival draws to a close. You close your eyes and drift towards sleep. You dream of torches and marble, of swords flashing like lightning, of blood spattered across gleaming stone. You dream of thousands of faces singing your name and jeering your fall. You wake before dawn once more. The torches are unlit. The banners hang still. The arena is silent. You taste dust and sweat and memory on your tongue. You rise and prepare again for the next day's spectacle, knowing that the grand festival has passed, but that the next will come, and you will stand once more beneath its torches with sword in hand, fighting for life, glory, and survival. You wake before dawn, with a start clutching thin linen sheets that itch against your skin. The ceiling of your rented room feels too low, and the shadows of dawn press against your eyelids. You taste dust in the air, and sweat from a dream-soaked night. You swing your legs over the edge of the pallet and press your feet into rough floorboards. Your ankles ache where the manacles once bit deep. You rise unsteadily and move to the small basin by the door. You splash cold water onto your face and see eyes that flicker with panic and hope at once. The mirror is cracked and clouded with age, but it shows a man whose scars map a life defined by the sword. You run a hand across the fresh stubble on your jaw and feel coarse whiskers. You remember the first time you shaved them after winning the wooden sword. You thought you could scrub away the blood and horror. You thought you could become someone else. You step outside and taste the chill air as though it were a promise. The city wakes in the hush before dawn. You hear voices calling for bread or water. You smell wood smoke and roasting beans. You realize that traders and bakers will not care that you once fought lions beneath torches. You realize that your fame in the arena means nothing here in the narrow lanes. You swallow hard and tuck your hands beneath your tunic to still the tremor. You move toward the forum, where you once passed beneath triumphal arches. Now you walk beneath colonnades to courtrooms and taverns. You pass men in togas waxing eloquent about tax rates and trade. You pass women in silken wraps gossiping about births and dowries. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished column and wonder if this is truly your life now. You clutch the wooden sword at your belt for comfort. It feels hollow against your hip. You step into a crowded stable where traders offer work for hire. You approach a bearded horse trainer and offer your services as a guard. He looks you up and down and laughs. He thrusts a coin into your palm and orders you to haul straw bales. You bend and lift. The weight crushes your chest and the sweat drips behind your knees. You swallow sweat and dust. You realize that muscle forged through the sand does not soften in the city streets. By midday, you sit on a stool in a tavern. A red clay mug rests beneath your hand. You sip sour wine and nibble stale bread. Around you, men shout dice bets and women pass platters of olives. The tavern smells of spilled wine and sweat. You feel lost among them. A young soldier challenges you to arm wrestling. He slams your hand into the table and cracks your knuckles. You break his hand in return and hear the laughter rise. You win a few coins and leave before he picks up a knife. You wander to the baths at dusk. You step into steamy water and let its warmth soothe your bruises. You feel the soap slither across your scars. You scrub and scrub until the lather turns red with grit and old blood. You rinse and soak until the aches relent. You close your eyes and let the heat carry away the memories of sand and steel. You climb narrow stairs to a rooftop where the sky stretches wide above tiled roofs. You lean on the low wall and watch smoke curl toward fading light. The city glows with lamps and candles in windows. You feel both relief and longing. You have freedom, but not peace. You touch the wooden sword and feel its promise and its hollow truth. At night, you drift through alleys to a scholar's home. You offer your services as a bodyguard for lectures. The scholar nods and pays you in books and paper scrolls. You listen to him speak of philosophy and poetry. You learn that life can be measured in words, not just in blood. You read beneath lamplight and feel your mind stretch in ways your muscles never could. You dream of a future where you can shape your fate with thought as well as force. But dawn brings fear again. You wake clenching sheets and taste dust. Your heart pounds with the rhythm of the arena. You swallow and press a hand to your temple. You wonder if you can ever escape the roar. You dress and step into the street where life presses in from all sides. You feel small among carts and calls. You feel the wooden sword weigh heavier with each step. You pass beneath an arch where a marble statue of the emperor stands. You look up and see his gaze turned away. You wonder if he remembers you, or if you exist only in the shadows of the arena's memory. You press your hand to the wooden guard at your hip and whisper a vow to live again. You walk on beneath columns and banners, carrying your past and forging a new life in the city's pulse. You breathe deep and step into the dawn, free but haunted, striving to become a man beyond the sword. You wake before dawn with the taste of iron still in your mouth and the weight of chains across your wrists. Each sunrise brings no hope but another reminder that you are bound by violence and fear. You rise from a pallet of straw caked with filth and cling to life by your fingernails. Every breath in this world carries sweat and blood and a promise of more pain. You learn early that hunger is as deadly as any blade. The bread you eat is stale and coarse. The water you drink carries dust and the stench of death. You swallow each mouthful as though it were wine because you know it may be your only meal. Pain claws at your belly as your wounds restitch themselves each night beneath torn linen. You wonder if your body will ever remember pleasure or only recoil from agony. By daylight, you are dragged into the yard to face the sun and the roar of thousands. You raise your blade, the wood and steel still damp with last night's sweat. The crowd does not see a man searching for redemption or for a way home. They see spectacle and wager their fortunes on your fate. You stand beneath a sky so bright that it burns your eyes. You step into sand, stained with the blood of beasts and of brothers. You fight for tooth and claw, for bronze and for laurel. You taste fear with every parry and thrust. You feel the weight of your shield like a punishment. It presses into your arm until every nerve screams defiance. You grip your sword until your knuckles whiten. You feel each cut and bruise bloom beneath your tunic. You fight not for life, but for another moment without a spear in your gut or a blade in your side. Each victory is only a temporary stay of execution. Each defeat is final and absolute. Between matches you roam the corridors of stone and shadow. You press your cheek to cold walls and pray for death or for deliverance. You hear voices echoing with laughter and curses. You see brothers in arms bind wounds with spit and blood and hope that their bodies hold another day. You share stolen bread with a nod and a glance that says no words can soften this shared curse. You carry your memories of chains and of straw and of the stench of the infirmary. You cannot forget the surgeon who burned your flesh with red-hot irons. You cannot forget the smell of vinegar and crushed herbs that washed your wounds and left them raw. You cannot forget the sight of your own blood as it pooled beneath you and stained the floor. When the festival comes, you are paraded beneath banners and torches. You wear leather and bronze made bright for a single spectacle. You step into sand that shifts like water beneath feet trained for war. You taste the roar of 1,000 voices, and you wonder if they cheer for you or for the man they will bury in that sand. You feel the thrill of blades flashing under torchlight. You taste the iron tang of life returned for a moment, and then stolen again. You win the wooden sword at last, and the crowd roars your name. But the sword is only wood. It cannot save you from the next blade. It cannot shield you from the verdict of the emperor, or from the malice of a man who envies your moment in the sun. You raise the sword and salute a world that demands you fight to the death for glory that vanishes at sunrise. When chains fall away and you taste freedom, you find that life beyond the arena is a different kind of battle. You walk through streets where traders call your name and children point at your scars. You taste wine that is sweet, but turns bitter on your tongue. You lie on beds made of silk and drift into dreams where the roar still echoes and the sand still clings to your skin. You wake in the hush, before dawn, still bound by fear. You learn that survival once tasted is never enough. You ache for the promise of release that came only through death in the arena. You ache for the certainty of the final cut and the dark beneath your eyelids. You ache for a world that did not demand you trade your humanity for applause. You live on because you sleep only a few hours each night and only to dream of the sand and the roar. You live on because your body still breathes and your heart still beats. You live on to carry the memory of every sunrise in chains and every crowd that cheered your agony. You live on to bear witness to a life that sucked out every ounce of hope and left you only the hollow echo of the sands beneath your feet. This is why it sucked to be a gladiator. Because each day was a struggle not just for victory, but for the simple right to see another dawn. Because every drop of blood spilled in the arena was another link in the chain that bound you to fear. Because your bonds were measured not in metal, but in moments of mercy and in the flicker of an emperor's favor. Because glory in the sands was fleeting and your wounds ran deeper than flesh. You remember each cut and each shout as though it were yesterday. You remember the thunder of hooves and the stench of beasts. You remember the rise and fall of the crowd's wave. You carry those memories like scars upon your soul. You carry them always, waking and sleeping, as both curse and testament to a life defined by violence. And when you finally taste the peace of death, you pray that your bones rest free of sand and chains. You pray that your spirit rises beyond the raw and beyond the memory of torches and blood. You pray that perhaps somewhere beyond this world you find the freedom you never knew in life. Until then, you bear your scars, and each sunrise in chains as proof that you survived the cruelty of the arena. And that is why it sucked to be a Roman gladiator.